I grew up in the early 2000s in a Soviet block of flats. There I sometimes slept in a pigeon house, a tiny room within a room which my parents built within our crowded apartment. Through the window I would look at what people did all day. And now I look again. What people do usually means their jobs, which come to define their identity. In 1966, the French philosopher Louis Althusser wrote about the works of Leonardo Cremonini, a painter attempting to depict the real abstractions of value that shape our lives: labor, capital, commodity, and others. While never tangible themselves, these abstractions exert undeniably real forces on our everyday. He argued that Cremonini paints the relations between things and their people, all shaped by their material circumstances. In these videos, I show how the real abstractions of jobs make the people that I know best, my immediate family members. Historiography is the study of how history is written and read. And this is my dad's employment and unemployment historiography. In this video, I address my dad's life in Soviet, 1960 to 1990, and independent Lithuania, 1990 to now. Besides the years where he was posted close to Moscow when he was in the Soviet military, most of his life was spent in Klaipėda, which is the port city of Lithuania that I also grew up in. To understand my dad's employment history, we need to understand the social and economic changes that took place. We also need to understand how he tried and failed to adapt to these changes. More specifically, the changes produced new formulations of the initial labor-value contract. And this contract always remained undisclosed to at least one of the parties. In this case, my dad. This produced informational asymmetry about what can be done to make money and what can you actually be paid for. New contract means new expectations. David Graeber explains how in the neoliberal workplace it is much easier to be fired for violations of form than it is to be fired for any actual incompetence. This form may include anything from language to protocol to bureaucratic particulars. The dominance of form over content was already the case in late Soviet socialism. Alelsei Yurchak describes it in his book Everything Was Forever Until It Was No More. The last Soviet generation, to which my dad belonged, was primed to regurgitate and perform ideology on a daily basis. In contrast, the chaos of early Lithuanian capitalism was promising liberated individualism. In theory, everybody could do better for themselves by being ingenious, hardworking, aspirational, and using whatever means, meaning whatever form, was necessary. A few decades later, the neoliberal form had become as unquestionably entrenched as the earlier Soviet one, and arguably it was less decipherable. This must have been both confusing and infuriating. My dad, like many others, was falling behind accelerated neoliberal capitalism. Before any employment, my dad wanted to be an artist. He already knew that as a Soviet artist he would have to actively reproduce ideology. But this was taken as a given. When he started his studies, he was 18. He did not get into the Vilnius branch of the Art Academy because he did not pass the entrance exam. In his essay, he wrote that, as a Soviet citizen, I am a zero in this society, which they saw as opposite to the Soviet position. The Soviet citizen was everything. As the communist poet Eduardas Mieželaitis wrote, my translation, My 2 legs stand on the sphere of the earth. My 2 hands support the ball of the sun. And in between the earth and the sun, I stand. Since he didn't get into Vilnius, he studied design at the local branch of the academy in Klaipėda. He studied there from 1978 to 1983. In USSR, right after your studies, you were posted somewhere to be useful to society, based on the profession that you had acquired in the studies. Generally, people wanted to get the best posting that they could, which meant central or close to home. This usually needed bribes and involved, even if local, but party-level decision-making. Straight after his studies, he got posted to a small town Plungė to do what a late Soviet artist was meant to do, meaning participate in the local production of necessary ideological content. This he was supposed to do for 3 years, but very quickly he got called to the Soviet military, and service was mandatory. After his initial service, he also got a job at the sergeant school, as an artist, designing military reports. In the style of late Soviet ideological discourse, the reports were mostly redundant and meaningless, but total adherence to form was expected. He was in the military for 2 years, until 1985. The first colossal change my dad experienced was the collapse of the Soviet Union and restoration of Lithuanian independence in 1990. He was 30. Right before this, he had been working at a furniture company, designing interiors for spaces like the Workers' Cafe. He got the job through a combination of nepotism and chance. He was quite literally brushing by the fence surrounding company territory, looking for things to do, when he got called by name by his ex-professor. Just before the collapse, he was asked to resign because of a public drinking incident. He got locked up overnight in a sobering jail, and the company could not openly tolerate this. Everybody was drinking privately, but a Soviet citizen should have never been seen doing it publicly. Around the same time, my sister was born and my parents got married. The drinking incident threw him into a prolonged period of precarious employment straight after the restoration of independence in 1990. Retrospectively, some may call it freelance. In early independent Lithuania, the economy was in chaos. National monetary infrastructure was being set up, the currency was shaky, but change also brought optimism. Businesses were popping up everywhere, they were seldom regulated, and they got up to the widest variety of things, which often included design, manufacturing, selling and reselling of seemingly unrelated goods. Some lasted longer than others, some merged, but most went bankrupt. Some of these my dad shortly worked for. For one Latvian company, he painted finishing signatures on their large-scale paint jobs. The money was great, but the boss did not oversee the labor-value ratio, meaning my dad worked very little, but got paid very generously. Once the boss realized, he cut the pay, seemingly without conflict. The ruble crisis of the 1998 certainly affected the early fragile Lithuanian economy. However, it also coincided with a general attempt at moving away from trade dependency with Eastern Bloc countries. Neoliberalization and globalization were the most profound transformations taking place at the time. In 1999, just 1 year after, my dad was offered a position back at the same furniture factory. But this was now a very different kind of company. First of all, they had significantly expanded and joined a much larger conglomerate. And so now they were speaking of the profit margin, which was the salary and investment ratio, and it was promised to increase. In reality, the investments grew and salary stayed the same. Capital accumulation was the name of the game. My dad did go on company-funded trips to Germany to learn about the furniture market demands. Whatever he learned, however, was not so appreciated by his superiors. Around this time they started using computers for designing, but since there was nobody to teach them, they learned from each other. The computer shaped his life from then on. Secondly came the internal mergers. Influx of cheap Polish furniture put pressure on the Lithuanian market, and so the company decided to reconfigure its departments. My dad's international sales and technical department got merged with marketing, and he was offered a job in sales. He was presented with a question of professional identity, because money was the same, but the appeal was not. The new job offer had to do quite a bit with not having to pay out leave compensation if he was internally rehired. Pushed by his boss, he agreed after 3 months of deliberation. Thirdly came the managerial turn. Expanding management portion of the company was increasingly relocating from Klaipėda to Vilnius, and the former was treated as a margin. Simultaneously, and very strangely, the company decided to build a brand new building in Klaipėda, to which my dad was immediately posted. Rumors had it had something to do with the CEO's family relations. Here my dad was responsible for managing non-standard orders for useful people that the company benefited from being on good terms with. These orders were rare and managed by my dad alone. This led to progressive isolation, purposelessness, and another drinking incident, but this time at work. He had the opportunity to apologize to the closest superior he had the fight with, but seeing no prospects at the company, he resigned. After that came the second stint of precarious freelance employment, which lasted from 2004 to 2007. This one was marked by bullshit jobs, which David Graeber defines in the book by the same name as a form of paid employment that is so completely pointless, unnecessary, or pernicious that even the employee cannot justify its existence, even though, as part of the conditions of this employment, the employee feels obliged to pretend that this is not the case. One gig was a Dutch company with offices in Palanga, which paid German salaries but did not require any actual work to be done. It turned out to be a tax evasion scheme for which they needed an actual office with contracted laborers, and it lasted for under a year. Further on, a woman who sold forest land to some German company acquired capital to set up a furniture salon. She was selling luxury imported furniture and employed my dad to man the shop for incoming customers who never came. He was promised a computer which he could use to work on separate orders while at work. When it became clear the computer was not coming, he left. This is a common experience even in decently paid bullshit jobs. Meaninglessness and boredom are intolerable states for people to be in. Luckily, he then got employed making interior design for a local furniture company. Unluckily, he, like many others, was very soon sacked in the blazing 2008 financial crisis. He was 48.
erponios, Shays mates mansukako penkias dashims. Prasham pabuti kartu pasalinks mindi. Pashakt.
Mielis Valentini, Svekina mielinkimis fecartus, Lamis, Penigu.
The 2008 financial crisis was the second colossal change that my dad experienced. Any stability that had been previously acquired was immediately challenged. Optimism of early Lithuanian economy was also gone. This was a total loss of trust in a financial order that had promised a safe distribution of risk worldwide. It was also an indicator of a new order of priorities. Banks and businesses were bailed out, and austerity measures were suffered by the rest. The 2008 financial crisis was the end of my dad's serial employment and ultimately dislodged his professional identity. He had had no interest in building furniture prior to the circumstances that shaped him, but now, retrospectively, this identity seemed irreversible. Now he was staying at home and taking the role of a caretaker for my grandmother. This meant several things. He had a very clear purpose. He also had enough free time to work on home videos that you are watching now. He also got increasingly isolated. Like it or not, a job is one of the central ways in which most people relate to the social sphere. Monetarily speaking, he negotiated for the unemployment benefits until they cut them off. He then secured caretaker benefits. Our family was also getting menial social support, and my dad was getting my grandmother's pension. All of this added up to a quilted source of household income next to my aunt's 4 jobs. After the death of my grandmother in 2015, he did not integrate back into the job market. He was 55. It might have had to do with age, isolation, remaining sense of unfairness, and the security that my aunt's stable income and support was providing. For a very short while, he did work at another furniture company, but it was immensely hard to adapt and he didn't last. But neither did the company. After a long time of unemployment and approaching his pension, he naturally turned his eyes to the internet economy, since he was spending most of his time by his desktop computer anyway. However, this was a contract altogether new and hard to interpret. This was the economy of attention. The notion of social parasites is being pushed in conservative politics, but a more accurate reading would be of a society that leaves people out. As Zuzanna Ściborska argues, precarity of labor is a condition necessary for creation of capital. Understanding that every worker's sustenance is contingent on their ability to sell their labor then allows us to position insecurity at the heart of wage labor, rather than as the condition of its absence. In my dad's case too, the changing employment landscape required him to adopt and to game precarity as a base condition. This, just to remind you, came after a Soviet economy that was so static and immovable they would set prices for 5-year plans. The skills necessary for adapting to these changing capitalisms were always assumed to be there but never universally taught. One of the main skills being the ability to recognize the self as both a source and target of investment. Under these uncertain circumstances, a household attempts to reconfigure itself in order to mitigate risk and adapt to change. For this reason, my aunt decides to become the stable provider for the family. But more on this in the future episode. See you next time at the Pigeon House.